Hello, I'm Gary Bingham. I'm a retired Army officer with 31 years of service, combined active duty and reserve assignments. The picture behind me is me in Vietnam in 1967. The purpose of this video is to describe a battle I was in, the largest battle I was in Vietnam. I was 22 years old and infantry officer, first lieutenant at the time. I had arrived in Vietnam on 24 December 1966, Christmas Eve, and I'll never forget I had my welcome event was receiving a red stocking full of candy from some lady, which I'd like to, it had her name in it, but it didn't have her address. I'd like to send her a thank you card. From Saigon, and now called Ho Chi Minh City, I was airlifted to the 3rd Battalion, 31st Regiment, 21st ARVA Division, 4 Corps. This is the furthest Allied unit in Vietnam, furthest south. There was no other American units in the area. We would go on operations and we were walking in salt water. When I came back from an operation, my spit-shine black boots would be turned white, and we had to do a lot of shining to get them back in order. I was assigned to the battalion advisory team with an Army Captain Shippey, very fine officer, and 2 senior sergeants. My counterpart was a ex-Special Forces captain, Vietnamese, and he had just joined the battalion, and there was a little bit of distrust towards him because they didn't know how reliable he would be in combat. We had received an operation order dropped by a Air Force Fort Air Controller, and I ran out in the field, and they dropped me the overlay. We put the overlay on the map, and the maps we used in those days were pictographed. They'd overlay a picture over a regular map because there was no terrain features. It was very difficult to determine locations. Many times I would have to point to a feature on this map to make sure that where I was at, and the Vietnamese many times would correct me. In the early afternoon, the next day, after I received the overlay, we were advised that half the battalion was going to go to the division headquarters at Bac Lu, while my half of the battalion would stay in Lam Sam. So in the morning, my boss and the 2 sergeants, and he took both radios, and down came 21 helicopters. The Vietnamese would be lined up in what we call sticks, small lines of people with ready access to get on the helicopter. It was really quite beautiful to watch all these helicopters to land, and then the soldiers to get on, and then they would swoop. They took off. So I thought I would be resting in the district headquarters and not be committed to battle. Hopefully I would not be committed to battle because the radios were PRC-25s and the PRC-10s the frequency was used, it wouldn't work. So shortly thereafter, I received word, it was actually mid-afternoon, to go down to the area where the zone was, where the helicopters would come, and we were told we were going to be lifted someplace. So I was really prepared to go to the division headquarters and go to the PX, but I was ready for combat. I had my overlay on the map, and I was ready to go. So I convinced my Vietnamese captain to have his people in the sticks. We just met each other. He did it. Down swooped the 21 helicopters, and we proceeded to get on these helicopters and go to who knows where. I was in the lead helicopter, and there was a lieutenant colonel there smoking a cigar, and I asked him, "Where are we going?" He says, "You're going next to Objective 22. And I said, "Sir, I don't have a radio. The radio I have I can't, it doesn't go in that frequency that's used. He just looked at me. So we proceed to land next to Objective 20. We're in an open rice field. Water's up to our knees. And we land on these three Vietnamese. One's a father and then two daughters, and they're out tending their field. And they immediately, there was this big pottery pot there. They start crawling underneath it. And they tell us that we're surrounded by a reinforced regiment of Viet Cong. My counterpart, the Vietnamese captain, his bodyguards immediately start digging him down. He goes a little lower every minute into the ground for protection. And then all at once, we receive massive amounts of small arms fire and other weapons. The 20% of the unit was lost immediately, either dead or wounded. So we lasted out there for a couple of days in combat. I needed a radio. I couldn't operate without a radio, so I got the PRC-10 radio and started going through the frequencies, trying to hear a U.S. American English voice. The first one I encountered, I told him who I am, where I was at. I could talk in the clear because the enemy obviously knew where I was at. He rejected it, and I was not able to communicate with him. And then I got another English-speaking voice, and I was able to communicate to him who I was, where I was located at, and he said he would handle it. Shortly thereafter, it appeared a lot lengthier than I'm saying. A helicopter appeared in the horizon and landed adjacent to where I was located at, and I had to run 50 yards, 50 meters under fire to get the radio. The radio was there, and I really wanted to climb on the helicopter and leave, but that wasn't my job. Immediately, I got on the frequency and told everybody where we were at, what we were doing. Fort Area Control, or in fact, showed up, Air Force officer, and we commenced killing as many of the Viet Cong as we could. Immediately, the jets arrived, Air Force jets, dropping 500-pound bombs, and there was a problem with that. The Vietnamese had placards on the back of their backs, and this would identify them so we wouldn't drop the bombs on them. The Vietnamese kept telling me to get the bombs closer and closer. And then finally, we were injuring some of our own people, and I told them immediately to back off. After the jets came, helicopters arrived, Army helicopter gunships, and proceeded to go along the line of the river where the enemy was deployed. After that, artillery bombarded them, and then this battle went on for hours. All the time I was laying in the water, and then also the Air Force brought a big Gatling gun in. It was constant. Finally, in the middle of the evening, I was notified by my boss, Captain Shippey, to go ahead and try to get some sleep. Now, we were instructed to carry a small amount of alcohol with us because the adrenaline you experience when you're in a battle like this is overpowering, and you can't relax. So I took a small shot of the vodka, was able to sleep for an hour or so, and then resumed giving information to continue the battle. They stacked the dead and wounded around me. The Vietnamese worship the dead, and so they want that evacuated with the wounded. A night evacuation took place. A couple of helicopters arrived. I brought them in with a flashlight and a butane lighter. We loaded the bodies on. I'll never forget this one Vietnamese, his warm blood was running down my arm as I'm putting him on the helicopter. And I dropped him twice because of tripping in the water and in the darkness. Finally got him on, and he said in perfect English, "Thank you." We ended up with 12 prisoners. The next day, the battle was over, and they dropped a Vietnamese Ranger battalion behind us. They advanced through us. And then shortly thereafter, I heard a lot of firing take place, which the battle was over. my Vietnamese executed these prisoners, and I reported it. I received the Army Commendation Medal for Valor and the Vietnamese Gallantry Cross. I'm going to go ahead and read to you the citation. For heroism in connection with the military operations against a hostile force, First Lieutenant Bingham distinguished himself by heroic action on 15 January 1967. You'd notice that this is a little over a month after I'm in Vietnam. While arriving as Assistant Senior Advisor. In this state, Lieutenant Bingham, with the 3rd Battalion, was airlifted into a hostile area. Shortly after landing, the unit was pinned down in an open rice paddy by intense hostile mortar, automatic weapons, and small arms fire. Realizing the need for additional support, if friendly casualties were to be minimized, Lieutenant Bingham called for armed helicopters and airstrikes. In order to direct accurate fire, the enemy position, Lieutenant Bingham repeatedly exposed himself to withering fire. He supervised the collection of the wounded, dead, and disregarding his own safety, personally carried the injured soldiers through sporadic sniper fire to the evacuation collection point. Lieutenant Bingham also coordinated the night medical evacuation, which resulted in saving the lives of several Vietnamese soldiers who were in urgent need of definitive medical treatment. Throughout the operation, Lieutenant Bingham's presence of mind and sound tactical judgment contributed to the successful conclusion of all encounters with the enemy. First Lieutenant Bingham's heroic actions were in keeping with the highest tradition of the United States Army and reflect great credit on himself and the military service. Now, shortly thereafter, we went on a resupply mission by trucks over a road between Viet Cong and Canto. And on the way back, I knew I was going to be wounded. I can't tell you how I knew it, I just knew it. We were on the road, and I told my supervisor, we're going down the road, and I'd been sitting on my flak jacket. I put on my flak jacket. I had had my beret on. I took my beret off, put my steel pot on, and then I actually took the safety off of my weapon, my carbine. And right after I did that, my boss turned around and says, "What are you doing?" Immediately, the fire commenced us, and I was wounded in my upper arm. We proceeded to a regional force, popular force outpost, and inside there, they gave me first aid. In the process, they stole my belongings. We were told that this could happen. I had my important documents in my steel pot. And as they're carrying me to the helicopter to go to the hospital, I says, "Please give me my steel pot." So they gave me my steel pot. I don't understand, that was my most critical valuables. I ended up spending a couple of months in the hospital. They thought they were going to have to amputate my arm. It became infected. I returned to Vietnam a couple of months later to another battalion, and that was the 4th Battalion, 7th Regiment, 5th ARVN Division, 3 Corps, and I was with them for a number of months. I was promoted to captain in the Army at the age of 23 on July 18th, 1967. I returned to Vietnam for a second tour in 1970, but this time I had branch transferred to military intelligence, and I was assigned in the J2 MACV in the Current Intelligence Indicators Division, 12-hour, 7-day-a-week job, really demanding. I worked for 2 Marine Corps majors, two outstanding officers. I retired from the U.S. Army after 31 years as a colonel, combined active and the reserve assignments. The recent Army Echoes magazine paper came out, and Major General Davis encouraged us to tell our Army story on social media, and this is what I'm doing today. I went back to Vietnam in 1994, long after the war was over, and went to the area where I was shot, kind of resolve issues that I had. It was crazy. I grabbed a motorcycle and gave him so much money. I had my map with me. We went to the area, and and then I realized that I could be mugged or anything else could happen. So I had him return me, and I did this safely. I'm going to read to you now a poem I've written about being a U.S. Army officer. My dream as a youth was to be an Army officer. I saw movies where they had officers dancing with pretty women, smoking, drinking cocktails, and I says, that's the life for me. There was some of that in my career, but really it was a lot of hard work. So I ended up being in 3 branches of the Army, infantry, military intelligence, and I had an assignment also in the military police. In combat, willing to advance in the field under enemy fire and engage the enemy, facing the possibility of certain death. Making instant decisions under stress, chaotic conditions. Ignoring personal injuries and accomplishing the military mission. Striving for ethical behavior for myself and others. Being strong both in temperament and constitutionally. Faithful adherence to achieving the organization mission. Actively supervising, checking on the people in my unit, effectively communicating the needs of the organization, adjusting work requirements as needed, constant study to be technically and tactically correct in my behavior, presenting an image that others are willing to follow, enjoying the structure of the military formations, drill and ceremonies, pomp and circumstances, leading to discipline under battle conditions, relishing earning medals, promotions, and meeting the required standards, bearing the sacrifice of a 7-day a week and 24-hour-a-day job, noticing details which are important to achieve military objectives, save lives. The Army model, being lean and mean, surviving under battle conditions for days, weeks, months, innovative, adapt, overcome, and achieving objectives, avoiding stupid career-ending actions. This battle I described today, I've been married 55 years at the end of this month. I had never mentioned this battle to my wife. This is the end of this video.